Hello everyone, my name is Charlotte and I am the designer and owner for the Coalition for Fashion. And in this video I'm actually going to be making the second corset from this book. I'm doing the jean corset from the 1780s. If you watched the last video, you know that I'm actually making the corsets into goddess costumes, and the last one was the goddess Demeter. And this one I'm actually going to be doing the goddess Eris. So let's get to it. So this is the corset I'm doing this time, and instead of taking this grid and just scaling it on my gridded pattern paper, I decided to just scan it in to Photoshop and then put a grid over the screen and then just scaled this up until these little squares and the scale matched the 1-inch grid, and then printed it out. And we're going to see how well that works. So let's make my mock-up. So I'm looking at all these boning channels and I'm thinking that this isn't actually a corset. These are actually stays. The title calls it a corset and in the description it's called a corset. But if I remember correctly, they were stays when they were heavily boned, and then a garment called a corset came out that wasn't actually boned at all. But then later boning channels were added and it was still called a corset, so it just had a lot less boning than stays did. So I thought I would go and look it up, and on this website called the Dreamstress, it says that stays were a term used for fully boned lace bodices worn under clothing from the late 16th and early 17th centuries up until the 18th century. So that definitely makes these stays. And it also says corset, like corsage, comes from the French term for body, corpse, gross. And the term was first used in France in the 1770s. And then in 1777, which incidentally is the year I was born according to my old Blockbuster rental card, the guy entered it in wrong and didn't know how to change it. So if I went without my card and I had to use my name and my birthday to look up my stuff, I had to tell them my birthday was in 1777. But anyway, in 1777, a corset was described in French as a little pair of stays, usually made of quilted linen without bones that ladies fastened in front with strings or ribbon. And then if we cruise on over to a website called Fabric for Cosplayers, and if you scroll all the way down to the bottom, it says, to sum up, if it is reed or steel reinforced underwear from the 16 to 1800s, call it stays. The same thing dated after 1800, call it a corset. And if you wear on the outside, call it a bodice. You won't be 100% accurate, but only a costume historian will argue the difference. So I'm going to go with these are actually stays and not a corset, even though I'm probably going to keep calling them a corset because that's just the word that we tend to use more often today. Once that is all cut out and sewn, I fit it on my dress form. I did also fit it on myself to make sure it fits a human as well. Dress forms are very handy, but it's always best just to double check on an actual person. Now let's get this laid out on fabric so that we can get this thing cut out. I am using the same fabric for the lining as I am for the outer layer. I then transferred the boning markings using tracing paper and the pointy end of the knitting needle that I don't even know why I have because I don't knit. But somewhere along the way I acquired knitting needles, and I keep them because they come in handy when you need to hold something super close to the sewing machine needle and you don't want to use your finger for fear of sewing through your finger, which I've done. It hurts. Once they were all marked, I sewed the boning channels using a silver thread. Then I spent the next several hours cutting boning, filing the edges so they were smooth and would not cut through the fabric, and then shoving all the boning into the boning channels. Then I folded all the seam allowances under, and then I sewed them all down by hand. I laid all the pieces out in proper order on my sewing table, and then I whipped stitched the pieces all together until they resembled a corset. Then I added the trimming to cover all the seam lines. I covered the top and the bottom edge in a twill tape, which I had to work around all of the boning. It was so much work, but worth it for how it turned out. Then I put in metal grommets, which I know are an evil thing to do in historical corsets. They should all be hand bound, but I'm okay with the choices I made because I really hate doing hand bound eyelets. Like, really hate it. To place the grommets, I actually stab a hole with an awl and I use that to push the metal grommet in. This way I'm not actually punching a hole in the fibers of the fabric. It just pushes them out of the way, and this actually will make it still just a little bit stronger than it would be had I actually cut a hole to put the grommet in.